Salawat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طاسيم. تلك آيات الكتاب المبين. لعلك باخع نفسك ألا يكونوا مؤمنين إن نشأ ننزل عليهم من السماء آية فظلت أعناقهم لها خاضعين وما يأتيهم من ذكر من الرحمن محدث إلا كانوا عنه معرضين فقد كذبوا فسيأتيهم أنباء ما كانوا به يستهزئون أولم يروا إلى الأرض كم أنبتنا فيها من كل زوج كريم إن في ذلك لآية وما كان أكثرهم مؤمنين وإن ربك لهو العزيز الرحيم وإذ نادى ربك موسى أن ائت القوم الظالمين قوم فرعون ألا يتقون قال رب إني أخاف أن يكذبون ويضيق صدري ولا ينطلق لساني فأرسل إلى هارون ولهم علي ذنب فأخاف أن يقتلون قال كلا فاذهبا بآياتنا إنا معكم مستمعون فأتيا فرعون فقولا إنا رسول رب العالمين أن أرسل معنا بني إسرائيل قال ألم نربك فينا وليدا ولبثت فينا من عمرك سنين فعلتك التي فعلت وأنت من الكافرين صدق الله العلي العظيم. Today we're privileged to be welcomed again by Shaykh Rida Jichi, who is a Hawza student, Al-Mahdi Institute leader and part of the Ahlul Bayt Cambridge community. Can we welcome him with a loud salawat?
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum. I'm very happy to see all the faces again. May Allah bless you all. It is narrated that Imam Ali alayhi salam in one of his beautiful du'as, he says, Ilahi anta kama uhib, faj'alni kama tuhib. My Lord, you are like I love. Make me like you love. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Thank you. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد يقول الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقال رجل مؤمن من آل فرعون يكتم إيمانه أتقتلون رجلا أن يقول ربي الله وقد جاءكم بالبينات من ربكم صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So inshallah I'll be talking about Taqiyya in this talk. The roots of Taqiyya, how it is justified in Sharia, some misconceptions about Taqiyya, explaining it first of course, talk a bit about some historical development, especially in the Shi'i history, and if we have time inshallah I'll talk also about some maybe objections. But before that, let me take a few minutes to extend our condolences to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, to our Imam, to everyone here, to every lover of truth and freedom in the world on the occasion of the martyrdom anniversary of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam Sajjad, our fourth Imam, who was endowed with the great responsibilities immediately after the events of Karbala in the year 61 Lil Hijrah. Imam Sajjad was responsible of clarifying what happened, clarifying the truth, facing the propaganda of the Umayyad government, clarifying that those who were killed were not the enemy, they were not disbelievers, they were not rebels, they were actually the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Imam Sajjad had also the mission of rebuilding or recreating a new elite of Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, because all those first-class elite were either killed in Karbala or imprisoned in the Umayyad prisons or lost in the desert. So Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, in 30 plus years, this is what he focused on doing. Imam Sajjad had also the responsibility of spreading the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, despite the difficult circumstances that surrounded his life. And inshallah, I'll touch upon it very briefly in my talk too. So let's start on Taqiyya. Now, linguistically, when we say in Arabic, وَقَى الرَّجُلُ شَيْئًا, it means that someone took a shield from something to protect him from something. Yeah? You remember the term taqwa, very same root. Waqa, taqwa, taqiyya. So this is where, for example, we see in one of the verses Allah says, فَوَقَاهُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِ مَا مَكَرُوا. And Allah protected him from the evil of their schemes. Right? So there is evil, there is protection and shielding. This is wiqaya. Or in the khutbah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam welcoming the month of Ramadan. What does he say? اتَّقُوا النَّارَ وَلَوْ بِشِقِّ تَمْرَةٍ. Shield yourselves from the fire, even if you have to offer a tiny piece of date for people to do iftar. Yeah, ittaqun nar. So shield yourself from nar. Now the technical meaning of taqiyya is what? Is basically when you conceal your thoughts, when you conceal your ideas, your beliefs, when you even sometimes say things or do things that are not in line with your beliefs, when you are a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet and the message. Yes, that's a very important condition when you are a believer. Because this way, with this definition, you take out what? Nifaq. Hypocrisy. Because hypocrisy is quite the opposite of this, isn't it? When you conceal enmity towards, let's say, the message, you don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet, but you show that you do, for interests. So that's nifaq. Taqiyya, no. You do not compromise your beliefs. Your beliefs are never compromised. Yes? But because of certain circumstances, you will have to say something, do something, or maybe conceal your thoughts because of some pressures, because of some harm, because of there is a threat somewhere. And that's important too. There has to be a certain exceptional circumstance that there is a hardship, there is a threat, there is a possibility of harm, unbearable harm, as we'll mention inshallah. For example, if you live in a place where you being a Muslim is a crime, so what would you do? You would conceal your faith maybe. And this is the verse that I recited in the beginning about that man from the family of Pharaoh. So chapter 40 verse 28, this man from the family of Pharaoh concealed his faith. And he came to talk and defend the Prophet. So this is an example. Another example, sometimes actually you might have to swear by God that you're not Muslim, for example. If there's a threat of death or a threat of severe hardship. So this is something that you do, you say, that is not in line with your belief. So these are some examples of taqiyya. Now, of course, there is a misconception somewhere. Like now, if you go and surf the internet, you will likely come across some pages, some videos that would tell you what? Taqiyya is a Shi'i thing. It's a Shia thing. You know, they live by taqiyya. It's something that is like main fundamental belief in their belief system, which is not true. And therefore, the Shia are, for example, liars. So you would find this kind of popular, mainstream, sometimes non-Shia understanding of taqiyya or perception of taqiyya. And that's problematic, to be honest, because then whatever you say, you will not be taken seriously. Like now, if anyone is listening who thinks that Shia do taqiyya everywhere, every time, I can't do much, to be honest, to convince them, because everything I'd be saying, they would be thinking that it's just saying it. Yeah, it's not serious. Habibi wallah, our Quran is the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the Quran that you find in Mecca, you find in all the mosques of the Muslims, all the houses of... No. You're saying this just because you are Shi'i and you are doing taqiyya. No? So what can you do then? You just give up, to be honest. So the reasons for this kind of misconception is possibly a confusion of the Shia or the followers of Ahlul Bayt with maybe some groups who are who have some batiniyya kind of beliefs, who hold that, for example, the truth should not be revealed, the truth should be concealed. Not everyone is able to bear the truth, so it should be concealed in all circumstances. So some people might have confused the Shia with these kind of groups. Or it could be the result of an incorrect or unreasonable reading of history, because those do not know that also in Sunni history there was times where people had to do taqiyya too. We remember, for example, at the time of the Khalifa al-Ma'mun, the time of the Khalifa al-Ma'mun, who appointed Imam Rida as the crown prince, isn't it? He basically launched an inquisition campaign. Why? If you believe that the Quran was eternal and is not created, then you are mushrik. And all the scholars had to comply with this tenet of faith. And we see most of the scholars, they would actually say, yes, fine. They would do this taqiyya, basically. Except a few, maybe Ahmad bin Hanbal was one of them, actually. But all of the scholars, or most of the scholars, they complied. Now, Ibn Kathir actually explains, he says, well, these scholars had to do this. And he called it musana'a. Because, they had interests, they had some wealth, some rights from the treasury, they had their jobs, they had their positions, so they had to secure all these, and it's fine what they did, right? But he calls it musana, yeah? Basically it's taqiyya, it's what we call taqiyya, it's the same thing. Maybe taqiyya is actually more serious, because it can get, kind of more serious towards life threat. So taqiyya is indeed in line with Islam. It's not lying, or it's not, outside the line of Islam. Why? I'll mention it, inshallah. I'll mention the evidence. So what allows one to do taqiyya? It is allowed under, so there's two titles. One is the main one, which is the title of compulsion. Yeah, necessity, because of hardship. For example, this is what's called ittirar, or ittirar. Ittirar is what? Is when you're in a situation where there is a life risk on you, or that there is an unbearable hardship. That's what they call ittirar. Yeah, some hardship that you cannot be, you cannot bear it. So basically what you do with taqiyya is that you would avoid that unbearable hardship in the interim by saying words, by concealing your faith, by doing some things, so that you avoid that hardship. So that you avoid that hardship. Because the opposite person, basically what they're doing is what? They're oppressing you. They're harassing you. They are attacking you. They're threatening you. They're persecuting you. So this is a natural response from humans, from us as humans. So in the hadith, in the Sunni sources, the hadith is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ in this kind of expression: رُفِعَ or رَفَعَ اللَّهُ مِنْ أُمَّتِي الْخَطَأ وَالنِّسْيَانِ وَمَا اسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has lifted the pen, as in we are not held accountable. The ummah is not held accountable if they do khata, honest mistake. If you do an honest mistake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pardons you, obviously. Forgetfulness, you're pardoned when you forget. وَمَا اسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ, and what they have been kind of forced or compelled to do. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not hold us accountable in these situations. And Suyuti, his opinion is that this is one of the popular or mashhur hadith. Ibn al-Arabi al-Maliki also, he suggests that the scholars agree about the meaning of the hadith at least. In the Shia sources, you would see this, for example, in Kitab al-Tawheed for Saduq, by Saduq, attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, and it mentions 9 things, not just 3 things. From these 9 things, it says, رُفِعَ عَنْ أُمَّتِي 9 الْخَطَأ وَالنِّسْيَانِ وَمَا أُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ وَمَا لَا يَطِيقُونَ وَمَا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ وَمَا اضْطُرُّوا إِلَيْهِ. Similar content, basically, plus a few things. So that's one title, yeah? Hardship, ittirar. The other title, usually you hear it from scholars, which is called something like the greater interest of the Muslim community. Sometimes you have in fiqh some particular conditions or particular rulings that we say, look, it is okay, we could sacrifice these for the interest of, or for the larger interest of the Muslim community. For example, in the Shi'i fiqh, in the Imami fiqh, the leader of the Jama'ah has to be what? Adil, has to be Imami, Ithna Ashari, yes? But if there is a Jama'ah that is there with the Muslims, it is okay that you sacrifice these conditions, and if the leader is not Imami, say, it's okay, you go and pray because this is better for the outlook or for the spirit of the Muslim Ummah as a unity. This is where Imam Sadiq, we see traces of this from Imam Sadiq when, alayhi salam, when he recommends or he commands his companions to go and pray with the Muslims. He says, go and pray with them, even if you disagree with them in your madhab or in your, some thoughts. Go and pray with them. So why does one then go to taqiyya by compulsion? Generally, this happens in situations where there is no freedom of expression, where there is no opportunity for dialogue, there's no bridges of dialogue, there's no intellectual discussion. No. Basically, it's my way or the highway. It's persecution, right? The highway would be persecution, would be what? Brutal kind of suppression, sometimes brutal killing, as we've seen in history. So this is what taqiyya is all about, basically. That you have an idea, right, lofty idea, you keep it, you conceal it, you reveal something that might be opposite to it in the interim as an exception, so that you are actually in line or you're living the reality, so that you're not far from the reality. In the Quran, let's go to the Quran, yes? There is generally 3 verses that are mentioned when we talk about taqiyya. The first verse is the one that I started my talk with, about that man from the family of Pharaoh who concealed his faith. So that's an example of concealing faith. Quran chapter 16 verse 106. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم من كفر بالله من بعد إيمانه إلا من أكره وقلبه مطمئن بالإيمان. An English translation. Whoever disbelieves in Allah, i.e. denies Allah, after his belief, except for the one who is forced to renounce his religion, while his heart is secure in faith. So see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about to rebuke some people, but immediately he says, well, there's an exception. There is some people who are compelled, but in their hearts, faith is still cemented, is still fixed there. That's an important condition there. And if we go to the historical accounts about this particular verse, we learn about who? The companion Ammar bin Yasir. At the early times of the da'wah to Islam, Ammar bin Yasir was captured, his mother, his father, Yasir and Sumayya were captured, were tortured, were forced to renounce the Prophet, renounce the message. And Sumayya and Yasir were killed. And Ammar, under that pressure, he uttered words of disbelief. When he met the Prophet ﷺ told him, Ammar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed your excuse. In aadu fa'ud. يا عمار إن عادوا فعد فقد أنزل الله عز وجل عذرك وأمرك أن تعود إن عادوا. Ammar, God excuses you, don't worry. If they do it again, you do it again. So this kind of gives a permission, and permission is not privileged to the person of Ammar. It's because of the situation, the circumstance that forced Ammar to utter these words, and this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also excuses the servant. Now Imam Sadiq, in a narration in Kafi, I'll skip it now, he actually extracts a general jurisprudential ruling or principle that between death and saying what you don't believe in, you are allowed to choose. Yeah. So this is what taqiyya actually allows you. The second ayah is Quran chapter 3 verse 28. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقات. English. The believers may not take the unbelievers for their allies in preference to those who believe. Not allowed. Whoever does this has nothing to do with Allah, unless, exception again, unless he does so in order to protect himself from them. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, look, there is a situation, exceptional circumstance, that allows one to do this. So which basically, this verse is licensing, showing wilaya or showing, let's say, agreement to the kafirin at the superficial level, without, of course, merging or without aligning your beliefs with theirs. So remember, your heart has to still keep connection with the faith. Otherwise it becomes nifaq. And the Quran actually talks about this. Chapter 4 verse 140. بَشِّرِ الْمُنَافِقِينَ بِأَنَّ لَهُمْ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا. And 141. So give good news of painful punishment to the hypocrites who choose disbelievers as allies instead of the believers. Do they seek honor and power through that company? Surely all honor and power belongs to Allah. So once you actually show disbelief and in your heart start thinking that, okay, I'm actually now in coherence with their beliefs, genuinely, internally, then you're a munafiq. If you seek some interest that you might want to gain, then you're a munafiq. Huh? The Quran very clearly says it. So, taqiyya therefore gives you an option. When it is about your personal circle or circumstance, you have the option. You could either choose death, and that was the situation of whom? The mother and father of Ammar. So Sumayya and Yasir, they actually died. They were killed. So they chose death. Ammar chose to survive. Huh? So it actually allows you to choose between the two things. And with this permission, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to respect two things. First is your desire for life. Your desire for life. With dignity. So Ammar bin Yasir, when he did this, his dignity is preserved. Not that he will live in shame, I did this or I said that. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserves your dignity when you choose your desire for life. Or the other option, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also respects when you choose what? That you want to manifest your deep faith by choosing martyrdom, for example. Huh? Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam was asked once about this. He was told عن عبد الله بن عطاء in Kafi. قلت لأبي جعفر الباقر رجلان من أهل الكوفة. So two people from Kufa, they were captured by the army of Muawiyah, by Muawiyah. And they were demanded to denounce Ali and curse Ali bin Abi Talib. So the person is telling Imam Baqir, he said one did curse and he was released. The other person refused and he was killed. What do you think? Imam Baqir said, أما الذي برئ فرجل فقيه في دينه. That one who renounced Ali, he's knowledgeable about his deen. He knows his excuses. He knows the rules. He knows that Allah pardons him. وأما الذي لم يبرأ فرجل تعجل إلى الجنة. As for the person who did not denounce Ali, he hastened to Jannah. Huh? So, this is when it is related to your own personal circle. So you have the permission. But when exposing the truth harms someone else or a group of people, huh? If now some people come to me and tell me, look, do you know the house of Iqbal uncle? And I know they will harm him. Yeah? It's a threat. Yeah, of course I say, no, I don't know. I don't know his house. Right? Otherwise, that would be a problem, isn't it? So this it becomes wajib to do taqiyya actually, because you want to preserve the interest of a person, the life of a person. And sometimes the interest of a group, the interest or the life or the health of, say, the leader of this group. And this is what we witness in the history of the Shi'as actually throughout the early Muslim history. Right? So let me actually touch upon that point so that we appreciate what this means. I'll go a bit on a kind of a historical narrative of how taqiyya might have developed. So let me start from the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, right, to the time of Imam Rida. So that's around 150 years, 200 years, right? So we notice at the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam and the time of Imam, say, Lady Fatima, Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, we see at this early stage that there was an exclusion of the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. There was an exclusion. Yes, there was some exceptions that, Imam Ali would be asked for a consultation, for example. He would give some advice. Yes, these happened, but not in the sense that Imam Ali had a certain, circle or school in the mosque where he would be spreading his knowledge. That wasn't the case. Huh? So there was a kind of an exclusion. Imam Ali, Lady Fatima, Imam al-Hassan with Muawiyah too. So there wasn't an establishment of the Ahlul Bayt school. There wasn't any spread of the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt properly. The time of Imam al-Hussein, we know what happened with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Yeah? And what happened with Imam al-Hussein is that, the bloodshed of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and his companions and his family what it did is that it laid the foundations for later establishing the school of Ahlul Bayt, the pillars defining the features by the later Imams. What do I mean? You know, sometimes you have a group who are in the shadow. In the shadow. Something happens, some big tragedy happens, and then it floats to the public. Then it floats to the spotlight. Right? This is what the revolution of Imam al-Hussein did. And it inspired many revolutions later. It inspired many revolutions during the Umayyad time, during the Abbasi time even the revolution of Fakh as well, 100 years later. So this is what the blood of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam did. Now after that, with Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, with Imam al-Sajjad, now as I mentioned in the introduction, Imam now has a responsibility to clarify this message. But of course, the circumstances were very difficult, very, very difficult with the Umayyad kind of surveillance over him. And therefore, he did that covertly, with some tactics. He didn't have, schools like we would hear about Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam later. No. He would do it, quietly. He would embed the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam through du'as that he would recite, which reached us today as a Sahifa Sajjadiyya, for example. He would teach slaves, some people in his house, he would teach them, and then when they graduate, he would send them to the corners of the earth. Very smart. And after Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, now we see at the time of Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq, because there was a decline in the Umayyad government and there was a slow rise in the Abbasi government, so this political gap allowed these Imams to actually be more active, more overt in teaching their teachings, or the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Yeah? And it reached its climax at the time of Imam Sadiq, where we hear reports that 4,000 people would be present at the circle of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Very powerful influence, very powerful influence. But of course, at that time, after the Abbasid government had become powerful, very established, now pressures started to occur to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. There was a lot of pressure from Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, for example. A lot of pressure. There are reports that say Abu Ja'far al-Mansur would say something like, if it hadn't been that this person is my cousin, he would be very annoyed how many people are surrounding him and come to him. He would say, had he not been my cousin, I would have done this and this and that, And there are some reports that talk even with a harsher tone than this. And there's a report, for example, let me share it with you, that once Mansur wrote Imam Sadiq, why do you not visit us like people visit us? Because he wants legitimacy for his authority. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and there's a report that actually Mansur would say, by God, I will kill this man. He is doubting our authority, something like that. He's doubting our legitimacy. So he's saying, why do you not visit us like people visit us? Imam Sadiq answered, لَيْسَ لَنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَا نَخَافُكَ عَلَيْهِ. We're not interested in anything in this world. We don't have anything in this world that we fear for because of you, or we fear from you for. وَلَا عَنْدَكَ مِنَ الْآخِرَةِ مَا نَرْجُوكَ لَهُ. Nor do you have anything in the afterlife that we would hope it in you. وَلَا أَنْتَ فِي نِعْمَةٍ فَنُهَنِّئُكَ بِهَا وَفِي نِقْمَةٍ فَنُعَزِّيكَ بِهَا. Nor are you in a blessing that we should congratulate you for, nor are you in a calamity that we should console you for. And he responded, he said, but okay, accompany us so that you can give us counsel. اصحبنا لتنصحنا. Imam Sadiq wrote him, من يطلب الدنيا لا ينصحك ومن يطلب الآخرة لا يصحبك. Whoever is after dunya does not give you counsel. Whoever is after akhirah does not keep your company. Later, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was martyred. There are reports that say he was martyred by poison. From Mansur, there are reports that say, he died a natural death. The Shia narrative usually choose that he actually was martyred. That's Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Now later, with Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, we know that he was imprisoned 15 years or so, or even more, placed in prison. Okay, why? We ask ourselves why. Isn't it because these Imams were actually doing a highly powerful and influential work, rather than some narrative that some people claim that, these Imams were living by Taqiyya. They were living by Taqiyya. Some people think so. They were living in some corners, in the darknesses, in the shadow. And they would not be clarifying the ma'arif of Ahlul Bayt, the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt. In fact, we see in history that at the time of Sadiq and Baqir and Kadhim and Rida, there was the peak of debates on theology, theological debates. Amr bayn al-amrayn, between predestination and delegation, which is our position. Very clear. Imams clarified also positions on adl, justice, divine justice. What is divine justice? The Muslims were divided on this. Discussions on what? On imama, for example. That defined also the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Yeah? Discussions on tawheed. What is God? The attributes of God. No, they were very active. Yes, if they have observed taqiyya, it might be for not to get in direct clash with the authorities. One might ask, like Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he went for shahada, he attained martyrdom. Why did the other imams not do so? Does Imam Zaynul Abideen not want or like shahada? Does the Imam Sadiq, Baqir do not like or want shahada? No, it's basically, it wasn't necessary. What Imam al-Hussein has done was enough. Was enough for laying that foundation that later Imam al-Sadiq, Imam al-Baqir, Imam Kadhim and Rida, they started actually erecting that building and defining the features of that school. And it reached a stage where Imam al-Kadhim, for example, will be placed in prison. Now Ma'mun came to government and he thought, like, okay, look, this iron fist policy is not working. And it didn't work. Otherwise, why would Ma'mun suggest that Imam Rida in Medina should be brought to Khurasan to be the crown prince? Had it not been that these people were very influential in their communities in a way that would, raise the suspicion of the governments. Yeah. So this is just a brief overview, just to show that basically the Imam's missions were to teach the principles, define the features of the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, which Imam Hussein laid the foundation for, and that was the principle. If there was any deviation from that principle, it would have been circumstantial, only so that you don't get into clash with that, let's say, authority, because otherwise your goals would be jeopardized. Sometimes taqiyya could be because, the public are not ready for understanding some things that you have. Not any truth that you go and tell it. And we see Imams actually saying something like this. Imam Sadiq, when he would say to his companions something like, carrying our cause is not only accepting it, so this is in Kafi, but also to protect it from those who cannot bear it. That's a very important point, because some people go to the narrations of Imam Sadiq that, taqiyya, taqiyya, be careful, observe taqiyya, to think that when Imam Sadiq says, taqiyya is my religion, the religion of my forefathers, that this means that we live by taqiyya forever. No, that taqiyya is basically something like this. You protect sometimes knowledge or truth that from people who can't bear it. Not everything that you go and share it with people. You might create a barrier between you and the public, and therefore they would not accept anything from you. It's a very logical and smart move from any leader, actually. Imam also says to Mu'alla bin Khunais, Ya Mu'alla, conceal our cause and don't announce it. What is it? So it's a very important thing to actually go back to history and understand whom the Imams were doing taqiyya from. That's a very important point to analyze and to study. Was it the authorities only? Or was it also the public? Or was it the scholars maybe at the time? Because Imam's resources were very few, right? If, let's say, the prominent scholars or fuqaha at the time would, let's say, wage a war against the Imam in the intellectual sense, right? The resources of the Imam might be very weak to fight back, let's say, intellectually. So these things could be thought of in that sense. So when you are working in a cause that is generally in opposition to the authorities or the majority, then secrecy becomes your way to go, becomes your tactic. And this is where we see Imams actually recommending or commanding their companions, saying, for example, observe sabr and kitman. Observe patience, sabr, and kitman, secrecy, silence, quietness. Yeah? Sabr teaches you to what? To think, to take your time and think before you act impulsively maybe. To weigh options, to calculate. That's sabr. And kitman allows you also to be able to have this margin of movement when you are someone who's carrying the truth and carrying thoughts of truth. Yeah? Very important attributes. Okay, so inshallah, I think I might be out of time. Let me take a couple of minutes just to mention the other extreme. When is taqiyya then impermissible? Yeah? Is taqiyya something that is unconditional? Should the ummah reach a stage where it becomes numb to dangers, for example? Let's say there's an invasion coming. Oh, no. I want to preserve my life, the life of my friends. I'll observe taqiyya. Huh? Does it reach that stage? Does it reach that level? What is the limit? So this is where Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, when he says فَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ يَعْمَلُ الْمُؤْمِنُ بَيْنَهُمْ لِمَكَانِ التَّقِيَّةِ مِمَّا لَا يُؤَدِّي إِلَى الْفَسَادِ فِي الدِّينِ فَإِنَّهُ جَائِزٌ. Yeah? You're allowed to do taqiyya as long as there's no corruption in religion. Then no, taqiyya is not allowed. You can't do taqiyya then in that sense. Or when we see the Imam, so in Kulayni in Kafi, he reports from Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, لِلتَّقِيَّةِ مَوَاضِعْ مَنْ أَزَالَهَا عَنْ مَوَاضِعِهَا لَمْ تَسْتَقِمْ لَهُ. Taqiyya has foundations, has conditions. If you don't observe these conditions, you're not permitted to do taqiyya. Huh? You're not licensed to do taqiyya. Or the other hadith, Shaykh al-Tusi, narrating from Abu Abdullah Sadiq, إنما جعلت التقية ليحقن بها الدم فإذا بلغت التقية الدم فلا تقية. Right? If you observe taqiyya, and that means that some bloodshed will happen, taqiyya is not permitted for you. Because the reason taqiyya is there is to preserve blood, is to save blood. But once, if you observe taqiyya, it means that someone else will die actually instead of you. No, you're not permitted. That's a limit. That's a limit. So let me stop here. I really appreciate your patience. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, that He may increase us in knowledge and allow us to understand this very, very interesting topic actually. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلوات.
Thank you so much for your talk. Inshallah, we'll leave Q&A for after Salah, because I think it's Salah time, if that's
Brilliant.
all right. And
Yes.
then we'll get back to it after. That's
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you. Wudu facilities for women are next door. And inshallah, we'll have it adhan.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين وأولاده المعصومين بالحق حجج الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna aliyan hujjatullah. Hayya ala salat, hayya ala salat, hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala al-falah. Hayya ala khairil amal, hayya ala khairil amal. Qad qamatis salat, qad qamatis salat. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Inni wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawati wal arda hanifan wa ma ana minal mushrikeen. Allahu Akbar. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin ar-rahmanir rahim maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى الله أكبر. حول الله وقوته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. رب صل على محمد وعلى الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى حول الله وقوته. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi s-salihin. Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزاء مغفرتك والنجاة من النار من كل بلي والفوز بالجنة ورضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بني من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت استغفرك وأتوب إليك.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Aliyyun wal Hujjatullah. Hayya ala salat, hayya ala salat, hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala al-falah. Hayya ala khairil amal, hayya ala khairil amal. Qad qamatis salat, qad qamatis salat. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا وما أنا من المشركين. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانهر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى سمع الله لمن الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى Allah. Astaghfirullah Rabbi. Allah. Subhana Rabbiyal A'la wa bihamdi Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahus samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allahu Akbar. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. حول الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآله. الله أكبر. حول الله وقوته. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآله. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآله. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي إنب بموت رزقي وإنما أطلبه بقطرات تخطر على قلبي فأجول في طلبه البلدان فأنا في من يطلق الحيوان لا أدري في سهل أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في السماء أم في بر أم في بحر ولا يديم من كبر من قد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى وجل يا ربي رزقك لي واسع واقلبه سهلا وأخذه قريبا ولا تغنني بدل بما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا فإنك غنين عذابي ونفكين على رحمتك فصل على محمد وآله وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي محمد بن عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى زوجتك وفيدا غراء خديجة كبرى أم المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى ابن عمك أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وسي رسول رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله ولا بدأتك الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أئمة المسلمين من ذريتي ولازق الحسين علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا محمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والهجة ابن الحسن المهدي. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا صاحب الزمان أجل الله تعالى فرجك وصح الله مهرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أنصارك وأتمامك المستشرين بين يديه. السلام عليكم جميعا أهل البيت ورحمة الله وبركاته.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. We have a few minutes for question and answers if there are any questions from either side.
عليكم السلام. بسم الله. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
I mean, from what you said about where Taqiyya is not permissible, doesn't the criteria we have in fiqh that we follow, we do what is opposite what the Sunnis do, because the Imam must have said that in Taqiyya. What is your answer?
Thank you. So the question is, in fiqh, or let me say in usul al-fiqh, sometimes there are scholars who when they are faced with narrations that are conflicting, yes, they favor the one that is in opposition to the Sunni fiqh, and then they would choose that. Yes, so what do I think of that? So this is one of the areas where the topic of taqiyya is applied in the Shi'i school of thought. So in usul fiqh, there is that idea. And so basically between scholars, no one disagrees that the Imams have uttered some hadiths that were in taqiyya. The difference is whether they apply this methodology on the hadith as a preferential factor. So in usul fiqh, let me just maybe talk about this a bit. In usul fiqh, you know, sometimes we have different narrations, yes? Sometimes we have narrations that are equivalent in, let's say, their authenticity. They're being reported by people who are reliable, yes? So everything is equal. So what do we do then if the two reports are opposite? For example, we have a report that says khamr is najis. Another report that says khamr is tahir. And both are attributed to the Imams. And both are reliable. What do we do then? Some scholars, their methodology is such that, and this is the opinion of Sahib al-Hada'iq or Muhaddith al-Bahrani. His opinion is that the first thing we do before looking at any other factors is that we apply the rule of taqiyya. Meaning what? Meaning that, or the principle of taqiyya, meaning that the Imam must have said the hadith in taqiyya, and therefore we choose the hadith that is not in line with the Sunni school of thought. I'm saying Sunni, that's probably from me. The hadith, because there's a hadith from one of the Imams, Imam Rida, I think, when he said, okay, if you're faced with this situation, what you do is خذوا ما خالف العامة, or ما خالف العامة فخذوه وما وافق العامة فذروه. Whatever is in line with the عامة, don't take it. And the hadith that is not in line with the Amma, take it. Now here some understand Amma to be Sunnis. Although if you look closely, I mean, Sunnis don't have one opinion about things, right? There's so many opinions there. So if you say that it's just Sunnis or non-Shi'i schools, that's a bit problematic. So what I'm saying is not all the scholars have that methodology to that extent. Some people, so it's a kind of a spectrum. Some apply it as a first preferential factor when you're faced with two conflicting reports. Some apply it later after examining many other things. Some things like, for example, has this report been reported by meaning or verbatim? Has this report, for example, let's say the chain of reporting? Because some schools of thought in Shi'ism, they refuse, let's say, grading reports by chain. Because this is something that was imported from, let's say, the Sunni usul and so on. So the schools are many. And it is not one opinion. That's what I'd want to say. Did I answer your question? Yes, I think no, but you're being polite. Inshallah, we could have a conversation after it, inshallah.
So, I'm just taking another angle. There is a very interesting example of taqiyya. If you look at the Muslims in Spain, in the last few years they were there, power. When the Catholics came, they said either you leave or you convert to Christianity. After some time, they found that these people who have converted to Christianity. Now, what was the way they needed to show that they were becoming Christian? When they come out of the house, they had to swear at the Prophet and eat pork.
And what?
Eat pork. Khinzir.
Okay.
Which is not an easy thing for any Muslim to do, right? This was the test. But even after that, the Spanish Catholics were suspicious that these people are Muslims. So when they raided some of their houses, they found that they had dug wells and made ledges in the wells, and they were teaching their children Quran in those places, even whilst they are going out and saying. So this is the real taqiyya, where, of course, they had to show that they were Christians,
but in their heart.
And they were doing something about it, right? So that's I think
exactly. They were doing
moral.
something, keeping the faith alive. And these are the people who are called Moriscos. They're still. It is one of the more interesting examples of Taqiyya.
Thank you very much for sharing this. Thank you.
The lady side.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting talk. So, how would we apply taqiyya in the current world? Now, for example, we are in a global world. For example, if you talk with the other sects, they are very easy. They can access your information and your faith easily from the internet like this. So, for example, when looking at debates, for example, Sunnis, Shi'is, any time, for example, the positions of Shia against Sahaba, for example, when they raise these things, they straight away they tell them, stop doing taqiyya. It's not the world now to take taqiyya because it's easy. All your faith is accessible. So my point is, what's the point of taqiyya now in this world when the knowledge is very accessible, is very easy, and it's really difficult to conceal your faith because your faith is all on the internet. So that's the point. I'm saying my question is about current situation with taqiyya.
I see. In your question, I can sense that you have actually applied the principle of taqiyya, or you've touched upon the application of the principle of taqiyya on some particularities related to, let's say, intra-faith issues or intra-religious issues, right? So, look, what is the reason that now we're sitting here and we're talking? We're talking openly, and I really hope that people do believe that we're not doing taqiyya now, yeah? Why? Because we're not fearing something, are we? Right? So, and there is an environment of dialogue. There is an environment of dialogue. When that is there and that is secured, no one should actually doubt or fear that people are doing taqiyya or not. You know, if someone starts doubting that someone is doing taqiyya, then that person should question what environment of psychological safety they're securing for the opposite person. Yes? So it becomes a kind of a self-criticism. So in the modern world, yes, I mean, people have to be sensitive that, yes, there is no secrecy as there was in the past. That's one. Two, the points that you're alluding to, and some people in the Shi'i, let's say, faith, they suggest that some of the applications of taqiyya were things that are sensitive in that sense. As in, let me say it openly, yeah? That the Shia are people who disrespect and curse Sahaba, for example. This is something that is spoken about, that the Shia do. Although there might be Shias who do, but there is conversations and discussions, and you see now the fatwas of our Maraja and ulama saying, no, this is not permissible. Now sometimes we want to think, oh, the Marja is doing taqiyya. Okay, what's your evidence? That when the Marja, for example, says that, look, you're not permitted, it's haram, that you disrespect let's say, a figure who is holy to the Sunni school of thought. That's haram. Yeah? So these are things that we need to take as, or in, let's say, in the framework of criticism towards history. It is okay to stand and say, for example, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, that, please recite salawat. That some approach is not the right approach. And that, for example, did the Imam really have that position or that attitude or not? So what I discussed now today is, okay, the principle, right? How you apply it, that will require leadership. Sometimes it requires leadership. To tell you which is, let's say, the maslahah of the ummah. Which is the interest of the ummah. Because sometimes you can't identify it yourself. Yeah, should I observe taqiyya, should I not? Now, assuming that we know things for a fact, but we don't. When the scholars, for example, say things like that, yeah, this is, again, it is a step in towards the revision of the, let's say, the classical Shia attitude towards things, right? So not all the scholars, for example, agree that this was the Shia position, across all that time. If you see, for example, reports from Imam Ali when he says, don't curse these people of Sham, just describe what they were doing. That is enough. That is enough. We could actually move forward as Muslims with discussions and dialogue, criticizing, yes, but you don't have to insult the other person. You don't have to do it. Imam says, لَكَانَ أَبْلَغَ فِي الْقَوْلِ. You know, when you describe what the other people are doing or what the past people did, thank you very much, that's enough. That's very eloquent. That's very effective, rather than cursing. Rather than cursing. That's not very effective. Right?
Yeah, so for example, looking, for example, at debates, what the points that I'm saying is, like, for example, the Shi'i sides, when they start to debate, what I notice is, when they start to ask them about their positions about Sahaba, and they start saying, no, we don't care, we don't do that. They straight away, they tell them, look, this is what you have. And why don't you become open and honest with us and just talk, and let's just talk and talk dialogue, and then just tell us your faith. Why are you doing taqiyya? There's no point of, this is what actually they say. It's not like, they say like, there's no point of hiding your faith.
When you are actually hiding, you mean? Or we're actually not hiding?
You're like, because you're trying to say, look, we don't do that, we don't do this, no, you know, we don't curse, we don't do that. And they're like, you know what, I can't give you so many evidence.
So you're still assuming that
faith.
cursing is a principle that everyone agrees with.
No, but it's what I'm saying is available with the evidence, within your Shia belief of faith. So what I'm saying, they tell them, look, you shouldn't be really hiding that, because you're doing taqiyya on TV live in front of us. And I feel like what our position at that time, you feel that they're weak because they really can't justify that, because they're technically on TV doing taqiyya.
Yeah. Again, it's a particular instance where one would be applying taqiyya. Now, if you see where I'm going with you on this, is basically whether I agree that this is an application of taqiyya or not, right? Whether this is an application of taqiyya or not, that's where I disagree in the first place, actually, personally, with my thoughts, right? Because we don't do taqiyya when we go and criticize the Sahaba. We're not doing taqiyya there. We're actually being genuine.
No, but the position, they're trying to say, we don't do that, we don't do this, because that's what I'm saying. During debate, they say that, but they tell them, no, you do it because this is all your...
I mean, they can't put words in our mouth, isn't it? Right? So that's not a way to dialogue. You judge me for what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. When we say, look, we're looking back at history, not to dig, not to make digs, just to learn from it. And we know that some people don't like to go back at history because they know there are dark episodes there. They know. I mean, I've spoken to many of my brothers, from the Sunni school of thought, and they know there are dark pages in history. So again, when you have an environment where there is maturity, enough maturity that people can discuss the past without us having to curse each other, harm each other, disrespect even each other's beliefs. When there's this kind of maturity, why should one not do taqiyya? Why? If someone feels that they have to do taqiyya, it means something is wrong. Something is wrong, and that needs to be resolved, that particular thing. So if someone is accusing me that I'm doing taqiyya and they want me to be truthful and honest, I would tell them back, make me feel secure and comfortable to talk openly. If you see what I mean. So that's really my take on what you've mentioned.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you. I have a question which goes off on a tangent. Can I?
Please, yes.
So, with Ayam Azar, it's obviously going to last for more than 2 months whilst we're in a period of mourning. What is the Islamic stance on booking holidays for Muharram, Safar, till we go off mourning in Rabi al-Awwal?
So, if you go back to hadiths, the hadith. And we see, for example, what are the hadiths that describe the mourning for 40 days after Imam Hussein. We see generally hadiths that describe, that say, for example, the heavens cried over Hussein, the heavens bled over Hussein for 40 days, the angels wept over Hussein for 40 days, right? And the earth, for example, wept over Hussein. So there's something that shows that there is a kind of an existential mood of sadness for what happened after the tragedy of Karbala, right? So this is one thing. On the other hand, you have, for example, hadiths that, or maybe that's not relevant. So the hadiths that talk about mourning, they don't, as far as I have found, they don't talk about whether someone should be sad or not, or whether someone should not go on holiday or not. Yeah, if you want to talk fiqh, for example, right? If you want to talk fiqh, if you want to say or claim that, oh, I do not want to go on holiday in these 40 days. Okay, what is your evidence? What is that evidence? And that evidence has to be something from the Quran and the Sunnah, Quran or the Hadith. Yeah? So this is where, I mean, I'm not in a position to do ifta, to be honest, to tell you that, yeah, this is haram or mustahab or makruh or something. But I can tell you that in the Sharia sources, the hadiths about mourning, they come in that context. Whether one wants to apply this to your, to their personal life or not, that's their choice, and that's the choice of, what they choose to follow. I personally don't restrict my life in the 40 days after Ashura. So I'll tell you about my personal, I don't restrict my life. Yes, I observe respect, right? In Ashura, I respect the emotions of the people. I respect my personal emotions too. The outlook of our identity that, this is a month of sadness. I wouldn't, for example, do my wedding in Ashura or in the 10 days of Ashura, or maybe in Muharram, right? Because that's my identity. Yeah, that's my personal opinion. But if you want a fiqhi opinion, that's something that you need to check with the marja, to be honest.
That's similar if your parents passed away. Could you do the holiday in 40 days?
So the brother is saying, so if your parents pass away, would you do your holiday within the 40 days?
Imam is your wali, right? And when you do Father Wali has been safra and ziyarat and everything.
Yeah. And the Imam is your wali. I appreciate that argument, but to be honest with you,
that's the believing, basically.
Yeah, it's the faith part.
Exactly, matam is the believing, isn't it? So someone is doing the more matam and someone just sitting up there and go away, just listen to side. So that's the just level of believing.
Yeah. But this thing, it might be cultural too. As in, you might find if someone's culture.
It's not really cultural. It's just believing.
Faith. Okay, so it's faith-based. Yeah, because the reason I'm saying this is that I've heard this argument from certain cultures or countries saying that, look, would you do this if it was your father or mother? Like, right, okay, I appreciate that. But if you want to derive a hukm, a ruling, a religious ruling, make it part of the religion, that's different. You can't use these arguments to say that, well, it's part of the religion to do this or not to do this. You can't. It's a hujjah on you, maybe. You can say, like, my faith tells me this, I'm more comfortable with this. But if you want to tell someone else or tell off someone else, you have to have a more powerful evidence.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing than the Taqiyya. But Imam and Nabi, they never done the Taqiyya in their life. But Taqiyya is the part that the normal people.
Yeah. So the Prophet did not do Taqiyya.
Prove any Taqiyya from Rasul Khada till Imam Mahdi. Any certain proper hadith.
100%.
Any Imam done the Taqiyya. Part of the brother of Imam Musa Qadr. He done the Taqiyya when he been doing the watering and this and that for the family. So also too many Sadat did after in the 20 Abbasiyah. Yes.
But not the Imam himself.
Actual Imam doesn't have done it. Taqiyya is not for Imam and for the Nabi.
So that's an interesting, I think that's probably a theological standing that you're standing on. Yeah? But history might tell you otherwise. So do we want to judge history by theologies that we have now, and we say, oh, the Imam could never have done Taqiyya because the Imam is such and such and such? Or would we go to history and say, history told us that there is a chance that Imam actually did Taqiyya here and there, and therefore we modify our theology accordingly. So again, you want to see where you want to stand. But very interesting points, actually. Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I was just wondering, what are your views when you go to Hajj? Because when I went to Hajj, I saw other people praying in the Haram and some praying at home. What are your views on that prayer time? What would you say about that?
Did I have a conversation about this with you, Dr. Iqbal, or no? I forgot, to be honest. But this is one of some fatawa from some maraja in the past, where that you know the conditions of the Imam of Jama'ah, that's it. They have to be this, Imami, Adil, blah, 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 that's it. Apply it everywhere. So this is where in the past I think you used to see that. And I think at the time of Imam Khomeini, maybe it became really pushed that, no, you should pray with them. That doesn't make sense that you go and pray at home or you don't join them in salat. And I think I'm probably inclined to think, I haven't done a survey myself to be honest, but I'd say that majority of scholars, I'd expect that this is what they might say. But I need to do a survey before I actually claim that. But I think it is the norm these days that you actually pray in Mecca and Medina with the Muslims. Again, this is one of the things that I touched upon, you know, the general greater Muslim interest or good. But yeah. So I know the difference between the past and the present. So I can't really tell that it's a majority or not majority. I haven't really surveyed all the scholars. But the majority of the prominent scholars, they tell you, no, in Mecca, you pray jama'ah normally, no issues. Yes.
Thank you very much. I think we'll end there, if that's okay. And if anyone has any other questions, Rida's here for a few minutes afterwards and can answer them, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa al Muhammad.